We believe that local organizations closest to their communities hold the most effective and sustainable solutions. Yet, they often face the greatest challenges in securing the resources they need. Kuja is here to bridge the gap and accelerate change in the aid and development sectors. Incubated by ADESO, Kuja is built to equip local organizations, ensuring that solutions emerge directly from the communities they serve. Our vision is clear: a world where communities have the autonomy to shape their own future. Kuja connects and equips impact-driven organizations, shifting funding and decision-making to community-led initiatives. The Kuja platform is a gateway to discovering and amplifying impactful organizations across the Global South, offering transformative tools to foster connections with peers, funders, and new opportunities. Through 4 innovative solutions, Kuja drives this change. Kuja Link, tools to simplify fundraising and connect organizations with the best fit partners. Kuja Build, operational support to help organizations meet donor requirements and access direct funding. Kuja Learn, accessible resources to build skills, foster collaboration, and create lasting impact. Kuja Advise, a marketplace for pro bono expertise and peer-to-peer support. Kuja means come in Swahili. Come together, come learn, come grow, come connect. Kuja, accelerating change where it's needed most. Visit kuja.org to learn more. Okay, so that was just an introductory video to this session that we're about to have. So I'd like to say hello to everyone and welcome to everyone who's taken the time to be here with us today. We're so glad that you could join us for this important conversation. My name is Halima Songu, and I am the Communications and Marketing Manager here at Kuja. So as you've seen from the video, the short descriptive video of what Kuja is and what we're doing, we're building a vibrant and visible community of local organizations across the Global South. And this is the reason we have this particular webinar, which is an effort to bring part of our mission to life. So today's topic is diversifying funds and mobilizing communities for justice and progress, using FEM Colombia as a case study. This particular webinar is deeply aligned with our commitment as Kuja to amplifying local voices as well as rooting for localization. And so this conversation matters to us and to you as well, because it not only sheds light on key issues that Kuja, that are affecting our communities, but it also helps us shape how we support each other and connect with each other through knowledge and solidarity. So I have a few pointers before we begin this session. We now have a live interpretation, which is being offered by an AI translation kit, which is Boostlingo, who are here with us on the call today. And so the tech team from Boostlingo will share a QR code as well as a link to this information and how you can select the language that you'd like for translation. So this particular webinar will have direct translation into French and Spanish, since it's an English webinar. And so I'm going to share my screen in a few minutes to show you exactly how your screen should look like and give you the steps on how you can use this particular AI for translation services. So 1 second. So this is what, when you click on the link that has been provided on the chat, this is what you will get. So in this particular case, what you need to do is put on the audio for you to be able to hear the different language that you'll have selected. And so you will have used the QR code, you'll have scanned it, and it will lead you to this particular page. And so what you need to do to be able to hear what is being interpreted in whichever language you've selected is simply click on this.
so that you have that sound. And then you also make sure that you click on the captions so that it generates whatever is being spoken in the specific language of choice. Now, before you click on caption, you will need to select the language that you want interpreted. So if it's in Spanish, you will click on this and it will start interpreting whatever I am saying or whatever is being said into the language of choice. If you encounter any difficulties with this particular setup, please don't hesitate to use this particular question mark, because then you'll be able to get technical support and they'll be able to help you with any inquiries that you have. With that said, the QR code has been shared on the chat, and the link to access these languages has also been shared on the chat. And so you can access the different languages that you're comfortable with for this particular webinar. And as we get started on this webinar, I'd also like to encourage each of us to introduce ourselves in the chat. Tell us where you are, where you're joining from, the work that you do. And if you have any questions, this particular webinar has a Q&A section specifically geared towards hosting your questions. And so if you have any questions during the presentation, you can just pop them in the Q&A section, and we'll try and answer as many as we can at the end of this particular session. And with that said, I'd like to introduce Marie-Rose, who will be moderating today's conversation. She's president of the Romain Murphy Consulting, a management and strategy firm that works with small to very large local, national, and international nonprofit organizations. And she's a partner for community change. Marie-Rose, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Halima. Thank you for the introduction to Kuja. And I have to say that I am very excited about this particular session, because given what we're facing, let me first set up a little bit of a framework here. Why are we having this conversation? As international funders and donor countries, including the US, are stepping away from global cooperation, dynamic community-led global South organizations are stepping up and showing us the way to inclusive and effective community development and resource mobilization. In Colombia, FEM has been working with Afro-Colombian and Indigenous communities for over a decade to reclaim their lands, pursue their dreams, and build their communities. Ana Maria Gonzalez is joining us today to tell us more about this model, community-driven organization, and its successful funding diversification model. This is an in-depth conversation. And let me tell you a little bit about Ana Maria, and then she will have the conversation, the presentation. This is going to be a conversation to the extent where I've warned Ana Maria before, as we were talking before this webinar, and said, I may interrupt you, if there is something that I feel like I need to stress. And this is going to be only in good cause, because this is a great presentation. Ana Maria Gonzalez is a Colombian political scientist and mother of two. She co-founded FEM in 2007, securing land rights for 20,000 Afro-Colombian in 17 years via participatory models and social enterprises. She's an Obama Scholar, 2018. She served Cartagena government, tackling displacement and exploitation. Now, with Voces Nuevas, she's advocating for global South inclusion and a new world order. It is a pleasure and an honor to welcome Ana Maria Gonzalez Forero to this webinar. Ana Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Marie-Rose, and thank you, Kuja, for inviting me. I am very happy to be participating in an African platform from Latin America. I've been working really hard to create connections and to have us speak to each other more fluently and more persistently. And so I'm really happy to be here in this exciting webinar about the experience of my organization. And like my first word about this is my organization is nothing special, rather than just a community-based organization led by women, which makes it as powerful as anything can get. But I'm speaking not from a place of superiority or that my organization has accomplished everything. I'm hoping to be able to depict our troubles and the way we have solved them together based on what we have and what we own as our assets, which are community, creativity, and resourcefulness. And I think that's one of the things that we share in the Global South. So I just want to give hope and a push for people to really keep on going, because our causes are worth it. So we cannot let anything from outside just take them down. So I'm going to share a presentation. And as I told Mary Rose, this presentation is not a trap. I don't have to go through the whole thing. But I have it as a reference because I think some of the visuals can help us. Please tell me if you can see it now. Is it there? Good. Okay. So my organization is called FEM. It stands for Multidimensional Education Foundation, but we love the fact that it refers to two things. One is mostly made up of women, and the other one is in Catalonian language, this means we do. We do. We make things. We don't talk. We're not talkers. We're doers. So FEM was created in 2007 over this issue, and I'm going to give you a little bit of context first to explain so that it's better understood what's going on. So Colombia is one of the most mega diverse countries, and it is diverse not only in its ecosystems. We have 78 spoken languages in the whole country. We have multiple ethnic groups that have survived all the colonization process, and that we need to protect, especially because they are going extinct as time goes on. Like their languages are going extinct, acculturation happens. So we strongly believe that we have to embrace this diversity by helping protecting it thoroughly. And so that you really understand what it means to be from an ethnic group in Colombia, I wanted to tell you some data. You are 3 times more likely to lack a waste disposal system, adequate house flooring, and running water if you belong to an ethnic group in Colombia. And in ethnic groups in Colombia are divided more or less in 2. Some are Afro descendant and some are indigenous. And indigenous for us are the natives who were here before colonization took place, and Afros were the enslaved peoples that were brought from Africa during colonization to work in the fields in an enslaved manner since the 1500s to the late 1800s. So they have special rights in the legislation of Colombia, and yet they also have twice more illiteracy, huge barriers to healthcare, child labor, horrible schooling. I mean, there's a huge amount of inequality. But one of the most specific and dramatic inequalities in my country, Colombia is one of the most unequally distributed land ownership countries in the world. And the country has a legislation that enables ethnic communities to own their land. So what I did in this picture is I tried to make a drawing that was proportional to the ownership of land from the Afro-Indigenous community, both in the Atlantic or Caribbean basin and in the Pacific basin. So the rectangles there are more or less proportional to the amount of hectares that each of these communities have. So you see the pink one are the Afro titles in the Pacific basin. Those have been struggled and accounted for since the Constitution of 1991. Only in the late 1991 Afro and indigenous people were allowed to have their own land ownership. So that's what they've gotten with their struggles since 1991. Indigenous titles, both in the Pacific and in the Caribbean basin, are more or less similar. But as you see, that little blue dot is the number of Afro titles that exist in the Caribbean basin. So it's completely disproportionate, especially because most of the Afro people came in through the Caribbean. So the ports through which the enslaved peoples were brought from Africa are most of them in the Caribbean. So the people fled and took lands around the main cities, and yet the property of those lands has not been given to them and has not been legalized. So we thought, if we're a small organization, let's stick to a very specific issue that we can account on. And we started defending the land rights for the people in the Afro-Caribbean basin. So our project and our mission is to expand that little blue dot, make it become bigger. And the way we do that is because the legislation in Colombia is really good. We, in favor of Afro and indigenous communities. I joke in my organization, we say that the people that signed the laws didn't read them. And that's why the Afro communities have the laws, because Colombia has been extremely racist all its history. And it is very surprising that these very progressive laws are in place. Yet they are, and they are constitutional. So what we have done is we have used the law in favor of the communities. I love this picture. This picture is very recent. It was taken 3 weeks ago. We won a land litigation case that took us 11 years. That is Marcy, the girl with a t-shirt that says FEM, is our executive director. And the people right behind her are the community leaders that belong to a place called Rocha. It appears in colonial maps since 1773 and only got its land title in May 2025 through a very long litigation that we supported. So what we do, in a nutshell, is we inform communities about their rights. Some of them have been excluded for so long that they don't even know that they have constitutional rights. And we come in and also solve humanitarian urgent issues, such as hunger, like sometimes we come in and there's a lot of hunger in the area. We have a cultural approach and recognize their ethnic background. This is one of our pillars. We promote community organization and leadership. One of the things that I really like about that picture is that when we got there, women weren't leaders in the community. So one of the things we do is we promote female leadership and youth leadership in the communities, because we strongly believe that that is the change that communities need. Many times older men are highly politicized, extremely corrupt, and we transform communities by enhancing other forms of leadership. And then we create the packages that the legislation requires so that people can ask for their land solicitations and then stick and do all the legal, like we have to file another letter, another request, and be a pain until finally the titles come by. So that's what we do. And we have accomplished by now over 20,000 people in 7 places, in 7 different little towns have received their collective land titles. I call this land forever because in the legislation in Colombia, this land cannot be ever taken back. So it belongs to them forever, cannot be bought or sold. It belongs to the community forever. We also are managing 6,000 more requests. We have helped formalize 500 urban indigenous displaced people. We have created 3 social businesses, and we have mobilized the talent of 224 volunteers from 29 countries that have helped us create the organization and perform the impact. So in a nutshell, that's what FEM does. But I'm not here to speak about FEM. I just needed you to understand what we did, because I'm going to refer to many of the things that I've now mentioned, like a little bit generally, in terms of how we fund ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to deep dive into what the challenge is, right? This is what we're going to speak about. And this is where I think, yeah, please.
Ana Maria, so I mean, like you said, this is like you have a progressive law, but then you have a fairly racist and biased social context.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a part of me that says, where are the barriers?
Okay.
Because it can't be that easy. Not that you haven't talked about dealing with the bureaucracy, but what kind of challenges? I'm sorry, I have to ask because I feel like, you know, some of it is deja vu and whatever. So what are you're making it sound, even though you're talking about some of the challenges, like easy. I have the feeling that it's nothing. I mean, it is definitely not easy.
Definitely not easy. It's I'm just I'm an optimist. I can't help being an optimist, but it has been really hard. So it's really funny because some of the barriers I'm going to mention as part of the challenges of funding, but one of the biggest barriers we have is that the national state and the local governments don't know anything about ethnic legislation. I think they choose to not know because they should know. It's in the Constitution and it's been there since 1991. By now, they should know. But they act as this is completely new to them. And fortunately, the current national government has had a very strong position in favor of ethnic rights. But in the past, like more right-wing governments completely ignored everything. So we had to literally go to the offices and show them the Constitution and show them the sentences because they chose not to know, right?
So in the process, you had to educate people. You not only had to advocate, you had to educate and advocate.
Absolutely. So we've had to educate the beneficiaries. Some people in Colombia, and this is a very harsh thing that I'm going to mention, but we have something that we call endo-racism, which is Black people calling themselves white because for years, for centuries, this was the way to be accepted into society. So one of the challenges we have is helping self-recognition emerge and people stand proudly as Afro-descendants because they have a series of rights. We do this, and maybe this is an anecdote that you're going to like. We do this, one of our strategies is by using African cinema. So there's an organization called Muica that brings movies made in South Africa, in Kenya, and in other African countries. I mean, and they put them in Spanish, and then we showed them in the municipalities. And people start recognizing their own life in the movies they see, and then we explain to them, well, this movie wasn't made in Colombia. It's dubbed. It was made in Africa. That's what the word Afro-descendant means. Now, no, do you understand better what this really means? Like it means that you share the way you speak, the way you see your auntie, the way you play, the way you dance, no? So one of the issues is educating about self-recognition. That's been one of the biggest obstacles. Training the people, the decision makers, letting the decision makers know that they are forced by law to sign and to perform the steps, because there's a series of steps. There's 17 steps that a community has to take in order to get recognized. And if the office that receives the paper doesn't know, they just file. You don't know how many times we've lost the paperwork and had to restart it over. Like one of the things I really value about my organization is the archive we have, because when the state says we lost it, FEM says we have it. We can print it again, because the state has said we lost it many, many times. So those are some of the obstacles. But one of the biggest obstacles, coming back to is the challenge of funding. We were totally like completely depleted of funding for two reasons. And these are the two reasons that I really want to stress here, because I know that people that are listening to this webinar feel this way. And I know that small organizations have felt this way. One is that international cooperation considered our organization too small. So they needed us to be huge and immensely capable, financially, technically, report, monitoring and assessment, a lot of things, and they didn't take into account that 20,000 people owning their land is a huge impact for 5 little women. That they didn't notice. They noticed that we didn't have a huge office, we didn't have enough employees, we weren't located in Bogota, we were located in Cartagena. So immediately they distrusted, and it was really hard to get funding from international cooperation because we were not big enough. And we were really not interested in becoming bigger. You'll see why a little bit later. But bigger means harder to fund, harder to sustain. So we were deliberately lean to make sure that we were fundable because we knew our cost was gigantic. Many organizations in the international cooperation sphere fund missions that last 20 years at most. Ours is land forever. So the land, once the solicitation, this lady that is showing her title, that title, her great-grandchildren can show the title. And that is, I think, is true impact. But I was never heard. We could never get funding from international cooperation just because of the way it's set up. And the other thing was that because of the way I was located and where I'm located, many of the companies in the private sector in Cartagena, which are a great source of funding for other causes, weren't for mine. Because some of the land litigations that we were helping the Afros were against those companies. Unfortunately, sometimes because they knew and sometimes because they didn't know, some of these companies owned illegally land that belonged to the Black communities. And the Black communities, once you empower them, start telling you, okay, so this is false. I mean, this was my grandfather's. And you end up litigating against the big guys. And once you become that person or that organization, they're obviously not going to fund you at all. They're not interested in funding you, right? So we didn't have international cooperation and we didn't have private funding. So what were we going to do? Give up? Never. So what we did was we started analyzing our situation. So FEM started 2007. At the beginning was confusing. And then 2009, 2010, we start realizing what we have to do is the land titling stuff. This is key because it really opens up for everything else. I mean, you cannot develop anything if they don't own the land. They're never going to build better houses. They're never going to have companies or anything if they don't own the land because they're always thinking when they're going to get kicked out. So we thought the land issue, that's it. And we started analyzing and we realized 3 things. Cartagena is an incredible magnet for key stakeholders. Everybody wants to come to Cartagena. It's a beautiful city. It sits in the Caribbean. It's historical. It's interesting. It's challenging intellectually because of its inequalities. And so Cartagena was a magnet. We already had a great team of people that knew a lot about participatory methodologies, and we had multiple language speakers within the group. So we didn't have much money, but the group, the associates, the team that came up with this cause and that was sure, we were capable of a lot of things. There was an architect and engineers and a doctor, and there were political scientists. And yeah, so it was very multidisciplinary. We all knew our stuff in community-based methodologies, and we were language speakers. And so with that in mind, we started reorganizing our life. And this is one of the questions that I really want to, like, if you take one thing from this webinar, take this question. How much is your organization worth? Because when we think about tiny organizations like the one I'm describing, my organization is tiny, it's worth a lot. Not only because of the English speaking and because of how multidisciplinary it is, but also because we have incredible talents from people from the indigenous communities that know things that have been there for 4,000 years. Because Cartagena is a place where everybody wants to come, that has a lot of sociocultural assets. And so it creates a lot of sociocultural curiosities. People want to know more. So the value of our location became important to us. And I put it here like, we believe our organizational value comes from how much money we get. And we betray ourselves by believing that. We totally betray who we are, because who we are doesn't have to do with the money we get. It has to do with the things that we achieve. And FEM, for the first, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, we had no money. We had no money at all. We did everything from the strength of the volunteering and the force of the communities, and we found a way. And so I started thinking, this is not sustainable. We cannot stay like this, but this is an asset. So how do we transform this capacity, this resourcefulness, this creativity into something that works, okay? And so I created here 4 questions so that people can do the exercise. Is your volunteer work getting added into your balance and becoming monetized? And by volunteer work, I mean everything. That lady that comes early to the office and takes a broom and fixes everything around. The people in the community that are cooking for you because they value what you do. Everything is volunteering. We only think about the real volunteering as the professionals that are coming from the university. No. In the community, when we're holding the workshops, everybody volunteers. And that is accountable unless you don't account for it. Second, is the value of my infrastructure, my office, the venues of the community, the database. Like literally, I have a database of every Black household of those 20,000 people that I mentioned as an impact. How is that an asset for me? Yeah. How do I, and I don't mean selling the data. I mean, this is what I know. I personally say hello to people house by house. And my team knows everybody. We've seen those kids grow. They've seen my kids grow. How does that become accountable? How does those relationships become an asset? Has my knowledge, especially of its unique and traditional, been accounted for? For example, the traditional, that's why I put the weaving of the indigenous community. So this lady lives in Cartagena 25 years ago. She stopped thinking of herself as an indigenous, yet she knows the weave. And I said, listen, that is an asset. You forget it's an asset because you stopped doing it, but you shouldn't. Let's see how we can replenish that idea and what we did was we created a tourist project where she teaches how to weave. And the last one is your location and asset. And I really strongly believe that locations in the Global South are assets because we are where the oxygen is. We are where the jungles are, where the beautiful deserts are. We are the ones that have ecosystems left. The Global North has depleted everything. Our location is an asset in itself. And so just so that I make this point stronger, do you think anybody would like to volunteer in this beautiful place? And everybody wants to come. Like you see this picture and you're like, of course I want to volunteer in that place. Yes. I think that's one of the things that we really thought, okay, this is the value and we want to bring tourism. So we started rethinking our strategy. What did we need? A detailed understanding of our operational costs, for example. And what do I mean by this? We started thinking, okay, what do we spend the money on when we have money? We spend the money on transportation. We spend the money on food. And we spend the money on lodging. When volunteers internationally come to Cartagena, we pay a lot of money for hotels for those people. And we started thinking, how do we, instead of giving that money out, we keep it in. And instead of paying somebody else to do the transportation, for example, how can we partner with the guy that does transportation so that we create a business? And that's where Cartagena Insider Tours was born. We have a tour operator 10 years ago. It's still operating. And it helps us have providers for transportation, for meals, for tourism. It also gives us part of the rent of the office, and it allows all our communities to become members of the tourism project, and we do real life community guidance with a very responsible approach towards how much money they earn, how like overhead and operational costs. So we're not going to exploit the communities we work with. We work extremely ethically, and it helps fund the foundation. During 5 years, we had to close it because of the pandemic. We had a volunteer hostel because the volunteers came to Cartagena and they always had to have a place to sleep. Currently now, in this moment, we have 3 international volunteers and they're sharing an apartment. So the idea to reopen the volunteer hostel is there. We want to do it again. We're seeing how, because Cartagena has gotten really expensive, and so it becomes a challenge again to see how we reopen. But that is a key idea, because we're based on volunteering, we always have people that are coming to stay. And many times their universities pay the costs of the stay. And then the other thing you really need to know is, do you have a community of supporters that speak about you, share your content, buy your products, help you fundraise, right? I mean, you don't really need so many people. You don't need millionaires. You don't need huge philanthropists like Rockefeller. Maybe yes, maybe it would be really cool to have a project. But I also want to talk about the small philanthropy. The philanthropy of the lady that doesn't have money, but she says, I'm going to cook a cake so that you can sell it and get some money for the foundation. Yeah, you really have to be able to tackle into all that, because those are the community-based assets that allow an organization to continue. So this is what we did. And when we understood this, it wasn't that easy. It was step by step. When I tell this story, it sounds like it was really simple. It just happened throughout the suffering. The second thing we did was we started monetizing our own value. I told you a little bit about this before, and it is, we started budgeting, including everything that we were giving. At the beginning, we budgeted without that. So it looked like we only needed money. We were not giving money. And this allowed us to get better partnerships. We got a fiscal sponsor in the United States. I educated myself about what fiscal sponsorship was, how it worked, and we signed a contract, because we have many tourists that visit us through Cartagena Insider that then say, I want to give a donation to FEM, and we have a vehicle. It's not a humongous donation. Maybe it's $200, $300, and that goes a long way, because the global south and the dollar goes a long way. So we needed a vehicle to enable these people to actually be able to give. We filed grants with South-South partners. This is one of the reasons why I love Cuya, because I think many times the money we needed, for example, Celavip has given us very small grants, but they have given us our 4th grant now. So they have been, and they're not a huge international cooperation agency. They are small. They believe in community-based. They see our self-funding efforts. And so they've given us, I think they've given us like $40,000 4 times. With $40,000, our organization has been able to title 2 complete towns. So it means the world. And it's a much smaller approach than just having to write those huge projects for USAID that then get thrown in the trash. And you've put all your effort into that and you get nothing. And then we've realized that we can monetize our community for little bits of money through something we call crowdfunding. We have a partner in crowdfunding called Global Giving, where we've put projects in place a few times. Now there's crowdfunders in Colombia too that do it through the Colombian bank so that we can get pesos. But we understood that it wasn't so much about the gigantic ones, it was more about the smaller ones. We changed our governance. So we created like 3 tiers of ownership of the foundation. We have honorary members. We have associates whose yearly donations are mandatory, so that gives us a little bit of base money. And we have something we call FEM friends, who are the ones that help in everything. And we put them into the governance system because that gives people ownership over the decisions, over the meetings. And people like to participate, and they like to know that their support is in for something. And we also have two partnerships. Fundación Educativa de la Diáspora shares our office. They don't use the office that much, so shares the office with us and they help us with the rent. Again, it's about making it work for everybody. And then we have Fundación Grupo Social, who has not necessarily funded us, but we've done important projects together in Cartagena, which has given us a solid brand for them and for us about issues like risk adaptation. So to conclude, we went from this little pie, which was, this is my resources, the dark one. The dark blue is my resources. And then the light blue is projects that somebody gives me, which is a highly dependent model, because if the projects go, then you're gone too. To a pie that is more colorful, it has more sources of income. And if one fails, for example, during the pandemic, our businesses failed, but we had the others. During the pandemic, we crowdfunded through global giving because the world was thinking, oh my goodness, how are children studying? So we crowdfunded and we got tablets for all the kids in the communities so that they could go to school. So it depends. It depends, and you can adapt. It gives you flexibility to have these different sources of income. And well, again, to your question of the challenges, it hasn't been easy. It makes it more difficult, but it also enhances the community. So I am now very proud to say that FEM is not, it doesn't even look like whatever I thought FEM was going to be, because it's now a collective creation. It's a collective project. It has taken a life of its own. It survives in its very peculiar ways, but its mission is straight and we get what we wanted to do done. So the other thing is, you have the right to be selective. Sometimes the volunteers don't work. Sometimes they're not good enough. You get to choose because you're providing a huge educational experience, right? Also, if you're going to become a business person and if you're going to create businesses to help sustain, don't create a business that is completely different from the mission. As I told you here, transportation is key to tourism, and it is key to us. So it made all the sense of the world to make them, no? And so we can create scale economies with our own business making. That I think is also something very important. The third one is keep the organization lean. If you have a huge organization, it's going to be really hard to fund. Yeah, if you have a big project, well, you can hire everybody you want, but if you don't, keep it lean, keep it small, keep it impactful, keep the right people in, and have a person in charge of each of the fundraising strategies. That way, they don't get abandoned because a poor CEO cannot be on top of everything. So if you have a hostel, you have to have somebody in charge of the hostel. If you have a tour operator, somebody has to be in charge of the tour operator. Like, and also allow people to express their capacities and their creativity and let them lead. One of the things I've really learned is you have to trust everybody. Everybody, when they're working with love and with commitment for a cause, they're going to do a great job. They're going to do a great job. And that's it. I mean, that's what I wanted to say. And I don't know, Mary Rose, if you want to like spend some time.
I think that, first of all, I think it's wonderful. It puzzles me when you tell me that, well, it doesn't, I mean, having been around the block a few times, I'm not surprised because about the issue of size and everything else where people are questioning your impact. Unfortunately, very often, impact is not defined by the benefits that for communities. It's defined by, you know, the marketing presence. I don't want to say the snob appeal, but whatever it is, you know, people want to fund the big names and the large organizations. So I think that the idea that people have been able, because this is such a niche, have been able to gain title of their lands, people that were marginalized, is just fantastic. So all I can say is that I think it's fantastic, and, you know, congratulations. the question that I have for you, because this is something that at one point, because FEM has been around since 2007, and you went through different stages, and you had to try to figure out your model, what worked, and went through sort of like a process, and you build it over time. You just build it. So I have a couple of questions for you, because it sounds wonderful, but you know what happened and what's happening. I mean, from USAID to other donors that are stepping back and everything else. The problem is that, okay, I mean, some donors, it's progressive. USAID, it was overnight and fairly brutally painful. So what would you say to organizations that all of a sudden are in a lurch because they were depending on this money? Because the work that you've put in, okay, has been done over years. And yeah, I agree with you, because statistics show that that kind of support, individual support, network support, I mean, all of the strategies that you talked about is the best one. But it does require a lot of time, and it doesn't happen overnight. So what recommendations would you make to groups that all of a sudden are, facing their death, their termination?
I love that question, because I think that most of the creativity of this model has come from the crisis. So I think that there's no moment as a crisis to really think out what has to be done and follow your instinct about what has to be done. I know that some of the organizations, I'm sure that some of the organizations are also thinking, this we should have done before and we didn't do it because whatever. And then suddenly this is the time to, I don't know, make it smaller or eliminate this project that was unnecessary and you knew it was unnecessary, but you had it because, so it's a key time for making all those long-lasting decisions that having a lot of money doesn't allow to make. That's my first thing. And then the second thing is, remember, I'm an optimist, but I think we have a gap of money at this point. But I also think that there's going to be a lot of money, for example, in donor-advised funds and in philanthropy funds in the United States, because the incentive has been to put that money away in those donor-advised funds because things might change more. So I think there are already philanthropic funds that have been growing in the banks, and that we just have to find a way to reach out to those donors so that those donors find us. I think I'm always envious, and I'm going to be very honest about this. I'm always envious about Africa. Did you see the announcement by Bill Gates saying he's going to give his fortune to Africa? And I always think, Latin America, share. Not all to Africa.
I'm like, my other hat is as a co-founder, board president of the Haiti Community Foundation. Haiti. So
yeah,
trust me, I know the feeling.
Okay, I'm glad. So yeah, I'm glad I could be really candid about that. I'm always envious because Africa has so much attention, and Latin America is never in the global conversation. We are not poor enough. Or I don't know, we're not hungry enough. We're not Black enough, indigenous enough. I don't know what we are not enough, but we're not in the conversation. And it makes me curious, right? But I am sure that there's a group and a trend in philanthropy that will go the way Gates is going. So I'm not sure that there's not going to be enough money. I think it's going to change. And I think, for example, one of the big changes is impact investment. So I really think that people have to start thinking business. I really think we have a chance for businesses that provoke change. And I think we have a chance, but we have to change the language and we have to learn that. No? How to explain.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, one of the things, I mean, first of all, I want to ask the audience, do you have a question for Ana Maria? Because I know I could keep going. Okay. Anybody wants to ask a question? Big silence. Okay. So, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, first of all, a shout out to Global Giving, because I know my Haiti Community Foundation, Espoir, I mean, they're so fantastic in terms of community-led organizations.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I want to say, and I want to play the devil's advocate, you have presence, you have charisma, you're a hustler, the energy that you have, you're a connector. Okay? So many of these things are easy for you. What do you do with people who, you have a great, and I mean, there are a lot of people nowadays that are just kind of like frozen and in fear, because all of a sudden it's like, and that's one of the reasons why we're organizing some of these webinars, because we want to say, listen, this doesn't have to be the traditional way, or you've been conditioned in terms of you apply for a grant or you get money from this source and that's the only way it goes, because things are changing and God only knows where they're going to go. We can't expect them to be back to normal. Normal is gone.
Yeah.
Normal is gone.
Normal is gone.
So advice to people who don't have the kind of energy that you have and are sort of, okay, trying to figure out what do I do?
I thank you so much for saying that. And I am energetic, but I always think that one of the sources of my energy is the cause. I'm a cause-driven person. And so when I'm going to say something a little bit radical, I don't think people without energy exist. I don't think that exists. And I'll tell you, I'll give you an example. So one of the so our current chief operations officer, she's an indigenous lady. Indigenous people in Cartagena in the Caribbean are very shy, very shy. She was very shy, very timid, and her body, she's a very tiny woman. She's very small, very skinny, she's tiny, and she was shy. So and I see her now and I'm like, that person that I met 10 years ago doesn't exist anymore, because now she gets it and she understands that that without energy you cannot achieve things and you cannot convince and persuade. So what I'm really saying here is you have to look into yourself, because there's a why, or else you wouldn't be in the social sector. You'd be working in the financial sector and earning a lot of money. We wouldn't have this conversation. But you started doing whatever you're doing in the social sphere because of something that I don't have to tell you. And so you tap into that and it fills you with energy and it takes away the boredom and the tiredness and the fear, because you know that, like, I think land forever. And I think my kids, because I am not from an ethnic community, are not entitled to that. And I think I really want to do this for Afro communities. I really want to do this. And I've been kicked out, I've been insulted, I've been put pressure on, I've been criticized in so many ways, I've been legally persecuted, includes, sometimes I have even been called white. Why is this your issue? You're white. I mean, you don't know how many things have, and I know that I am not doing it. And sometimes I think I'm not even doing it for the people that are alive today. I'm doing it for their grandchildren. And it again, I'm back. See? So I really think that our causes are inside us. And we have to deeply like believe in why we're doing that. And then just be very, yeah, I don't think in the social sector there's one person that is not full of an incredible type of light. Because this is what puts us here.
I think that it's a question of connecting with, we all want to be part of something bigger. It's really connecting to your passion.
Absolutely.
And just realizing what your purpose is, what gives you a sense of purpose. So we're coming to the end, unfortunately, and I want to thank you for the work, the amazing work that you're doing, and your energy. I cannot wait to meet you in person next week in Bogota. And I'm gonna let Halima, and we're gonna have to, yeah, I mean, there is just so much there, and I think it's wonderful. And I just really want this video to just get, and your messages to just keep going to different people, because you're right. You can either let a crisis kill you, or you can leverage it.
Yes, perfect.
And that is what I've said as a consultant and a partner for community change, what I have said to people over and over again. Let it kill you or leverage it. And now is the time to leverage everything that we have and to believe in ourselves.
Absolutely.
Thank you, and thank you for those of us who, those of you who joined us. And Halima, back to you.
Thank you so much, Marie-Rose. And thank you so much to our audience for being here today. And a really, really huge thank you to our speaker of the day, Ana Maria. This was amazing. This was informative. It was gearing me up in the right direction. So to our participants, we really hope today's conversation sparked some, new ideas, or inspired you, or made you feel more connected to others around you, or others around this global south of ours who are doing important work. And just a slight reminder about Kuja. We are an online platform and a community, small for now, that amplifies the work of local organizations. And we are here to connect these organizations with a global audience. And so we're using, information sessions such as these webinars to just educate the masses that are out there, to interact with like-minded individuals, to teach each other, to grow, to connect. And by joining the Kuja family, you'll be able to access visibility, or to gain visibility, resources such as this ones, opportunities to just engage in rich global conversations, just like the one we've had today. And as I wind this up, mine is just to let you know that we'll be having more of these sessions. Tomorrow we have a webinar scheduled for 7 p.m. East Africa time. This particular webinar will be Spanish, but we'll have live interpretation in English and French. And it'll be talking about refugee-led organizations and their response to overlapping crises. So basically, it's going to tackle how what needs to change in these refugee-led organizations and the manner in which they respond to these crises. And so I'm really, really looking forward to seeing all of you join us for that particular session. If you'd like to keep in contact with Kuja, we're always open to questions, feedback, or ideas for partnerships, especially if you're interested in hosting a future webinar or collaborating with us in any other way. Just reach out to us at info@kuja.org. I have indicated all the necessary links in the chat. We also have a WhatsApp group, so I encourage you to join it and interact with us. And I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow in our next webinar. And I'm wishing you a good evening, a good morning, a good afternoon from wherever you're joining. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.